Hi everyone, Janelle here. I'm a functional nutritionist and doctor of natural medicine. This is my podcast where we talk about midlife wellness in the mountains. Have you heard of GSM? 80% of us will experience one of these symptoms, and most of us accept them as normal. Today, I'm talking to Kim Vopni, the Vagina Coach. She is here to tell us these are not normal and there are ways to avoid them. Kim is a pelvic health expert, and we discuss midlife health topics, including incontinence, prolapse, vaginal atrophy, topical estrogen, collagen, and more. And I also confess my personal reason I wanted to talk with Kim. You are going to love her. Okay, hi everyone, and welcome, Kim. I am so happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, okay, so Kim, I have followed you as the Vagina Coach for a long time now, and I direct so many of the women in my Midlife Hormone Club that I teach to you. And I have personally learned so much about my body by taking your Buff Muff course. So thank you for that.
Thank you
And
for referring people.
yeah, totally. It's easy to do when you have such great stuff. And I really love how clearly and scientifically and confidently you present all of this super important information. So thank you for your work. And again, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. So before I confess why I brought you here to everybody, um, can you tell us about what GSM is and the symptoms that are involved or that could be involved?
Mhm. GSM is a fairly new term to replace vaginal atrophy, and GSM stands for genital urinary syndrome of menopause, or genitourinary syndrome of menopause. People pronounce it slightly differently, but it's essentially a collection of signs and symptoms pertaining to the pelvis. So there's genital symptoms, there's urinary symptoms, and there is sexual symptoms. And they statistically, upwards of 80% of women will experience some, maybe a few, maybe all of those signs and symptoms. And they are not something, they're not one of the aspects of menopause that improves with time. So things like hot flashes or mood swings, or there's certain things that we can, that eventually will stop or slow down. Whereas GSM doesn't improve with time and can get worse. And sometimes it can take a little while for it to actually even present itself. So it's not as sudden as some of the other symptoms. And it may be 5 or 10 years post menopause before they show up. Which some people will then be like, well, I don't need to worry about my pelvic floor or my pelvis because I don't have any of those symptoms. But I always want to be more proactive and kind of jump in there. So under the genital symptoms, there can be changes to our external genitalia. We may notice the skin texture or color changing. We may notice that the skin is thinner, drier. We may have symptoms of burning and itching and irritation. Under the urinary side, and this is not an exhaustive list, but sort of the main ones, under the urinary category, we would see things like urinary urgency, urinary frequency. Some people notice an increase in anal incontinence or anal symptoms as well. Stress urinary incontinence, prolapse. And then on the sexual side, we have things like painful sex, difficulty with arousal, or we don't feel pleasure as much. The actual walls of the vagina, so like the external genitalia can change, the internal structure as well. The walls of the vagina can also lose their folds. So we have folds in the walls of our vagina called rugae, and they are what contribute to the expansion capabilities. So allowing things to come in, allowing babies to come out. And when we lose those folds, some of that expansion capacity is lost and insertion may become difficult or painful. And in really, really extreme cases, the opening, the introitus, the opening of the vagina may actually even almost fuse closed. We can have the same thing around the clitoris as well. So a lot of things we can see, but also a lot of things that we don't see, but we would feel. So the signs and the symptoms that would fall under that big umbrella term of GSM.
Okay, and I just want to click on a few things that you said. That is just so fascinating. I love the way you divide it and organize it because for me, when I'm seeing so many people with so many of these symptoms, I just love how you divide it into the categories and it's all under that umbrella term. And you said 80% of women?
Statistics is upwards of 80%. So that you will see between 50 and 80-ish. Yeah,
I
a
believe it.
lot.
Just working with this group of women in some way or another, and it looks different for everyone, and of course on the spectrum of intensity. But I definitely believe it. As you know, I am in that category, in that
Mhm.
80%, which we'll go into in a second. I also love the clarification which I find really important and empowering for women to understand between those symptoms that do sort of mellow out. I picture, like a big turbulent ocean during those perimenopause times when all of
Mhm.
those symptoms come up. And then for a lot of people, a lot of symptoms do calm down when we reestablish that new normal, our new hormone balance. So I think it is really important to clarify that difference. These symptoms are going to likely calm down, and these symptoms we're going to have to work on for the rest of your time here,
Right.
to stay on top of those. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really enjoy knowing that this is one of those. We need to work
Yeah.
on it.
And one thing that I didn't it's not that it's hard to say what category it falls under, but one really big aspect of the changes that happen to our pelvis and our vaginas and all the tissues around our bladder and organs is the excuse me, we have a, a change in the pH of the vagina. So we go from having an acidic vagina, which helps protect us against infection, to losing the acidity and becoming more alkaline, so to speak. And that increases our risk of UTIs. And many people have chronic UTIs, are never offered things like vaginal estrogen. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a minute. But then they have chronic antibiotic use, and eventually it becomes resistant to this antibiotic. And then it literally can be life threatening. So that alone is one of the most important things to know about GSM is that increased risk of infection and UTI. And so it's important to, as I say, don't just wait until we have symptoms. Let's address this proactively, knowing that it affects so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about some of the reasons these changes happen because I love that conversation. So you said the pH changes, and I would guess that has something to do with how the microbiome changing. I don't know which drives which, but since our microbiome changes with that uh, decrease in estrogen, I know those are related anyway.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So the loss of estrogen is a major contributor. We also have the loss of collagen. We also have the loss of um, hyaluronic acid. We also have age-related muscle loss, and we as females, we lose more type 2 muscle fibers, especially post-menopause. And type 2 muscle fibers are the ones that they're like the quick react ones. So when we think about urinary incontinence or stress urinary incontinence, where we have a laugh, cough, sneeze, some sort of exertion, and we leak a little bit of urine, it's the loss of those type 2 muscle fibers that are the quick reaction fibers that is playing a role in there. But again, not the only thing, but that's just another layer. So there's lots of different components, but it's usually the loss of estrogen that is kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. So we have been facing age-related muscle loss. We've been losing hyaluronic acid. We've been losing collagen all along the way, and we may have known and not cared, or we may not have known. And then once we reach our menopause and we have this really kind of fall off the cliff loss of estrogen, then all of a sudden some of these other symptoms that we have been experiencing all of a sudden are significantly worse, or we have symptoms showing up for the first time. And so the estrogen loss is really one of the key kind of turning points that triggers lots of other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And to compound the problem, I think, digestion wise, which is one of my other specialties, we have a harder time breaking down protein as we
Yeah,
get older. And so that just compounds this problem of losing muscle mass. So I love what you're saying, how there are definitely actionable steps to address all of these different components and all of these different parts. And I love thinking of all of these different topics like a bucket. And we have all of these different things that are going into the bucket. So it's not like there's one magic bullet. We have to
right.
sort of like address all the little things that are accumulating in our bucket. And when our bucket overflows, we get those symptoms.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
And then on the topic of the gut health piece as well, we also a lot of women will have been struggling with constipation for many years of their life, often during the perimenopausal kind of hormone chaos. Thyroid disruption can happen. A lot of people will experience hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's and constipation. And constipation is a major contributor to pelvic floor dysfunction. So prolapse, it can trigger urinary urgency and frequency, and we don't feel well. And now we're not getting out the like all the literally shit that we want to get out of our body is not getting out. And so we kind of have these hormones recycling almost. And so the as you're saying, it's like this cascade, and this we can't just look for one. Everybody wants that one thing. What's the
yes.
one thing I can do and it's going to fix everything? It's not. It's a big picture. And unfortunately, we have not been provided education, really in-depth, good quality education about our bodies as a whole, not and then specifically for us being female. All of the things like we learn maybe a little bit about our menstrual cycle, but we really don't understand our menstrual cycle and how that influences what's happening with our hormones, how that influences our energy and our digestion and our sleep and our mood and all the things. And we certainly don't receive any education about the pelvic floor and all of its responsibilities. And even people who I've worked with who've given birth multiple times and they're now post-menopause, now they're grandchildren, they've witnessed their daughters going through pregnancies and childbirth, and they still don't understand their own anatomy, and that's not their fault. We've just never been given this education. So it's not just a quick fix, it's really taking a step back and learning these things for the first time, and then a kind of going through the checklist of, am I hydrated, am I pooping well, am I doing my pelvic floor exercise, do I have collagen and hyaluronic acid and all the things that we can we help that we can use to help address everything.
Yeah, I'm getting so fired up around all of this that you're saying. I love it so much. And some people get overwhelmed that there's not a magic bullet, but I really love empowering women to know that there's just so many things they can do, and they
Yeah,
don't have to do them all per se, but just, one thing at a time to lighten the load
right.
and to support the whole system. And when we have these systems like you provide, we have a methodical system for addressing one thing at a time, doing what we can, not doing more than we have to do. And I just find it so empowering. And you're also speaking into one of the cornerstones of functional work, which is we're all unique, so there's something different for all of us. Every body system is connected. It matters how we sleep, it matters how we hydrate, it matters our mindset, um, and everything we do matters. So
Mhm.
I find that framework really empowering, and it gives people the tools and can meet them where they want to start taking action.
Yeah,
So yeah, thank you
yeah.
so much.
And people get, the overwhelm, and I try to kind of reframe it and say, I know I'm presenting you with this big, long, it could appear as a to-do list, but it's really an opportunity list, and you can choose where you want to
Mm.
start on there. And you may choose not to do any, or you may choose to just do a couple, but at least you can see that there is hope and options available for you, and you can then choose to do what you wish. And it's in my community, people will come in often. I have an introductory program called the Buff Muff Method, and I go through a series of educational videos that are 3 to 5 minutes long before we get to the exercise. And a lot of comments along the way are like, did I just by talking, am I going to get to exercises eventually? Because everybody wants the exercise because they think that's the magic bullet, and it's a component, but we want to lay the foundation with this education that you have been missing along the way that will ultimately get you better results, because it's not just about the exercise. It's a big component, and that's obviously a main thing that I preach, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah, amen. That happens to me a lot too. So our people that don't like that can commiserate together. But the people that love it, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
are just like, I get my body now. I get to take agency in my health. I don't have to do something that someone else tells me without knowing why and what.
Yes.
So yeah, so I love that. Okay, so let's get to the embarrassing part of why I actually reached out to you. And maybe this is TMI for people, but people that follow me know that there's really nothing that is too much in this department.
Likewise.
Yeah, I bet. So I was out on a run. I'm a trail runner in the mountains here. And so let's back it up first and confess that I have, since having my children, have always had some amount of stress incontinence. So, like jumping on the trampoline is always classic, things like that. But, never too much, not too horrible. It's in those isolated times. So, but since I am months away from menopause, my new symptom is sometimes I will be out on the trail going for a run. And when I have the urgency to pee, it is like, look out. It goes from 0 to 100. And I just am like, wow, Janelle, okay, this is another estrogen menopause new symptom. So I've been taking your Buff Muff class. Thank you for that. And
Mhm.
learning so much, even as someone who's pretty knowledgeable about my low back pain that I've had chronically and some limitations I've had since having kids. And then now this. And so I've had so many aha moments from your class that I am so grateful for. So I was like, all right, I got to get Kim on here. She has got to talk to us about some of this incontinence because I'm not like an old woman in diapers. I'm vibrant. I'm almost 50, so I don't want this going on forever. So I'm
Yeah.
going to take some action steps. What can you talk into about that?
hmm Yeah, it's definitely not just we have historically associated with something that happens to women as they are, transitioning to a nursing home or something like that. But incontinence can happen to anybody. It can happen to young, very fit people. It can happen to people who've never been pregnant or given birth before. It can happen to anybody. And pregnancy and childbirth are very well established risk factors for the development of incontinence and prolapse and lots of the other types of pelvic floor dysfunction. Not the only one. So, as I said, people who've never been pregnant before or given birth before can still experience pelvic floor dysfunction, but it is certainly an increased risk once we've given birth, and that's vaginal or cesarean. Cesarean has, you could argue some protective element from certain types of pelvic floor injury and dysfunction, but it doesn't make you immune to experiencing incontinence or prolapse or anything. And you said something that I want to highlight, which is, jumping on a trampoline, or it wasn't anything too bad. It was just, now and then. And that's what many people are in that frame where they're just like, it didn't happen before, but now it's just like, it's not a big deal. Oh, whatever. It's just once in a while. And I just won't jump on a trampoline anymore. But that is an early signal that the pelvic floor is saying, I need a little bit of help here. And we just ignore it because we either think that it's just the way that it is because I've given birth, or maybe I just need to do more core exercise and that'll go away. Or, we sort of hope and pray and we don't really address it because, again, we've never been told, and we see ads on TV saying that it's just part of being a woman. And we don't know about the care providers like pelvic floor physical therapists. So we just put up with it. And then as we were approaching our menopause, and now we have this hormonal change that's happening and potentially other changes that we've talked about already, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I can't manage this at this load anymore. So for you, running a certain period of time. So it could be a low estrogen state. It could be that the pelvic floor muscles are not able to continue to manage the load, like the distance or the frequency of your runs. It could be that the muscles are overactive, meaning they aren't, like, they're holding on to more tension than what would be considered optimal. So sometimes those people who've kind of been like, well, it only happens once in a while and it's this, unbeknownst to them, their muscles are starting to guard a little bit. If they feel like a leak might come on, they kind of guard, and then they end up developing this compensatory strategy where the muscles are holding on to more tension, thinking that it's helping, but it's not. So too much tension in the muscles means the muscles themselves become fatigued. They have used up part of their power, like part of their range of motion. So when it comes time to react or respond or manage a load, they are tired. Their reaction time isn't as good, and fatigue, all that kind of thing. And they may not have enough. They may not be able to generate the power necessary to address whatever it is that's presenting them. So tension is another piece. It could be a shift of organs. So pelvic organ prolapse is where the bladder, the uterus, and or the rectum shift out of their proper anatomical position, and they can bulge into or descend into the vagina. And with prolapse, it's statistically 50% of women who've given birth have some degree of prolapse, but early stage prolapse is often asymptomatic. And in the first part of the day, many people don't even notice, but near the end of the day, they might develop symptoms. So if you were, running towards the end of the day, or even running at a pace or a frequency or intensity that the muscles couldn't support that organ anymore, then maybe it will start to bulge. And that pressure, that displacement of it can trigger the symptoms of urgency and feeling like you need to go. And then we talked about the estrogen piece there as well. So there's a few things in there that it could signal. I always recommend every single person see a pelvic floor physical therapist at least once a year, just like we go to the dentist for our teeth once a year. Even if you have no symptoms, go get a checkup and see what's changed. We are a year older. We've had another year of things that we do and another year of hormonal changes or whatever it is. So we need to have a checkup to see where we're at and what can we do to help optimize that group of muscles. And then look at ideally a pelvic PT who will assess you in standing and movement, and then adopt a fitness routine that incorporates pelvic floor activation and relaxation. I really like hypopresses as well, which is another exercise technique that can be really helpful for helping us manage pressure and helping potentially reposition some of the organs if we catch them at an early stage of prolapse. So those are a couple of things that I would address initially.
Yeah, and this is what I love about your course is what you were speaking into earlier about there's the education piece first when people just want to get into action. Because everyone is different and whatever's filling their bucket is different, there is a different plan for everyone. I mean, I know there's some basics that are the same and some exercises that are good for everybody, but because of those videos, I have been sort of like teasing out, oh my gosh, and having those aha moments of what's going on with me and kind of being able to figure that out. So I love how you speak into that about, it could be any of these variety of things or combination of these variety of root causes of what's driving it, and that's what you need to figure out if you're going to resolve the problem. And on that note, resolving the problem, I read on your website and in the course, and I know you've said this, I love what you say: no, this is not normal, but yes, it is treatable.
Yeah.
And that is just so empowering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because a lot of people they, many people have been suffering for a long period of time, especially with prolapse. It's a real kind of kick to the self-esteem, and a lot of people's lives kind of come to a halt when they get this prolapse diagnosis or they're struggling with these symptoms. And if they've never been told about pelvic floor PT, they most likely have gone down the path of being referred to a surgeon and told that they need surgery. And there is no shame in choosing surgery or needing surgery. There are some times where all the exercise in the world is not going to fix an anatomical defect, and surgery is a fantastic option. But it should never be the first line of defense. And absolutely intervening with, first of all, I always say my first line of defense is not going to the doctor, it's going to the pelvic floor physical therapist. We want doctors like urogynecologists and gynecologists on our team, but they, in my opinion, are not our best first line of defense in terms of kind of an overall assessment and understanding what's happening with the pelvic floor. And then, a good 6 months, pelvic PT, consistent pelvic floor exercise, vaginal estrogen, avoiding constipation, getting hydrated, like doing all the things. If after 6 months, maybe even 12 for some people, if the symptoms are still not improving, or they haven't improved enough, and you're still experiencing disruption to your quality of life, then that's the time to consider surgery. And it may be a great option for you, or a pessary or something like that. But no shame in it. Just make sure you do the work first, because many people think that if they have surgery to quote unquote fix the problem, they don't need to do pelvic floor exercise. Or sometimes people are even told that by their doctor. Well, I fixed the problem. Now you don't need to do pelvic floor exercise. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that and say it's actually, you need to do it more, because you now have scar tissue that can sometimes come in and interfere with some function as well. So working with the pelvic PT to help manage that scar tissue so it's not going to create a disruption to muscle function. And we still have many years ahead of us. Ideally, we are still facing aging. We're still facing muscle loss. We're still, like, all of those things are still present. It doesn't remove the need to exercise. Just like if I go to the dentist and I either get a clean bill of health, or they say you have a cavity and they fill the cavity, that doesn't mean that I never have to brush my teeth and floss again. Right? If anything, I kind of have to be a bit more diligent because that happened, and maybe there's a reason for it, that I need to change something in my life. So, um, yeah. So we need to pelvic PT first, but then we need to be kind of consistent with about 6 to 12 months of intervention before we go down that surgical path. And it's there as an option, but I want people to know that many people of my community have canceled their surgeries because they finally have figured out what was happening, and they did some different things and they removed their symptoms. So that's great.
Yeah, that's absolutely great. I love it. So you've mentioned so many great tangible things that people can do in there, but for anyone in perimenopause or menopause, which is essentially anyone listening to this show or watching it, because that's who follows me, what do you think? What do you recommend? I mean, I know, and it's different if, there's different things that are contributing to everybody, but are there 3 things that you could recommend as great tools to address or reduce or prevent GSM? So those symptoms associated with the pelvis in menopause?
So pelvic floor exercise is not going to prevent GSM, but it will help with many of the symptoms. So, and pelvic floor exercise, many people will think of Kegels, and Kegels are very evidence-based. They do work when they're done correctly and consistently, but the challenge I have with them is they are a static exercise, meaning typically you're doing them sitting or laying down or standing. You're not moving. And we need to train the pelvic floor dynamically, which is the approach that I take. So dynamic pelvic floor muscle training is going to help with good blood flow and circulation, which can ultimately help with some of the symptoms. Vaginal estrogen is the gold standard. And I have a whole article that I've written on vaginal estrogen and other therapies to help with, I used the term intentionally, vaginal dryness, but GSM I talk about in the article. So we don't, again, have to wait until we have symptoms. Knowing that it is such a significant number of people and it doesn't get better with time, we can intervene earlier. So around the start of your menopause with vaginal estrogen. That's something you do need a prescription from your doctor. And you can have a tablet form that's like a tablet inserted into the vagina. You can use cream. You can use the E-string, which is like a little tiny ring that's inserted and left in for up to 3 months. So you can choose on the delivery method or mode that you like best. But I think to me, it just makes logical sense to preserve what we have and don't wait for symptoms. And let's keep the pH as it is, keep the suppleness, help with the kind of complements the exercise you're doing from a urinary perspective. And the painful sex can be because of low estrogen with the thin, dry tissues. It can also be from tight muscles. It can be from prolapse. So again, seeing the PT to understand what's happening with your pelvic floor, to understand why do I have pain with sex, and then we understand how to treat it and overcome it. It's very treatable. And then the other piece in there would be things like other supplements. So I do believe in supplementing with collagen. I do believe in supplementing with hyaluronic acid. Sea buckthorn oil is something else that can help with, there's evidence to show help for vaginal dryness symptoms as well. None of those are going to address the pH, so not reducing the risks of UTIs, but they can help from a comfort and tissue support perspective. So exercise, vaginal estrogen, and possibly other supplements.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And I will link your article on vaginal estrogen to the podcast. And I'll also, of course, link your Buff Muff because I've been such a big fan. And you'll be proud of me, Kim, because since your class, I've absolutely started, I do strength multiple times a week, but anything I do now, actually, not even just my strength class, even just driving in the car, I was sitting and I like lifted up a little bit and I was picturing my pelvic floor exercises while I did it. So I hope I'm
Nice.
making you proud. It's definitely a new
I
thing that I've incorporated into
Yes.
my life every day.
Yeah, it's this awareness piece, right? Once you
Yeah,
know, then now you know, and
now
then
you know.
it's an informed choice thing where you can now make adjustments to how you sit in a car or how long you sit or how you stand or what footwear you wear. Like there's so
Yes.
many things, right? So yeah, that's cool. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that.
So is there anything before we part here that you would like to yell from the top of a mountain so that everyone knows about pelvic health in midlife?
I like to leave people with the message that we've sort of already said, but it's never too late. So even if you are listening to this and you are 8 years post-menopause, you may have a mother who is maybe 80s, 90s, and it's never ever too late to come in and intervene and make changes. I have a 93-year-old in my Buff Muff community. That's the oldest that I know of. But another woman gave birth 11 times, and like we if we receive a diagnosis, like somebody says, "Well, I've had multiple prolapse, I've had surgery repair, I've had this, da, 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 will this still work for me?" It may not reverse every single symptom, but it is still essential. It is still essential to do pelvic floor exercise, and it can absolutely make a change for the better. So it is never too late. You just need to commit to it 10 minutes a day, and put yourself at the top of your to-do list.
Great. This has all been brilliant. So helpful. Thank you so much for being here, Kim, and thank you so much for your work.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Bye-bye. That's it for this week. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a comment and a review as that helps it reach more people. You can find me and the courses I teach, the Midlife Hormone Club and the Energy Club, online at Mountain Rebalance. I help midlife women understand their body and age better. If that sounds like you, please join my newsletter. And if there's a topic you'd like me to cover here or an expert you want me to have on, let me know. In the meantime, keep playing, and here's to aging our best.